Hello and welcome to Bunny's Kitchen. I'm so glad you're back. Today we are reviewing Farmhouse on Boone's fermentation method. She is a YouTuber and a blogger, and I came across her by accident, actually I think when I had the flu, and decided that for Christmas I wanted to make my family fermented sauerkraut, pickles, and jalapeños. I thought I would take you through my journey and everything that I learned along the way. First, we'll start by talking about the sauerkraut. As you can see, we have eaten quite a bit of this. This is a really big jar. I'm not even sure how many ounces, but it's a wide mouth, very large jar that I got new lid for. The sauerkraut, spoiler alert, was probably my favorite. I had two favorites, but it was definitely really good. It was messy to make, pretty easy in the fact that you needed two ingredients. You needed salt, and I ended up getting the kind that she recommended. You can get any sea salt as long as it's not iodized table salt. I'm not sure the reasoning behind that, but I was following her method, so that's what we did. So what I did is I halved and then quartered and cored three. I ended up doing 5, but hers is in groups of 3 heads of cabbage. 3 heads of cabbage in my food processor with the attachment that shreds cheese. That gets it really fine, and that's what she recommended. I'm sure that you could dice it anyway, but I think it also helps break down the cabbage at a faster rate than if you were to hand cut your cabbage. So the only issue with that is having to cut it in small enough pieces to fit down the chute to shred in your food processor. But beyond that, making a huge mess. Once I was done shredding, getting all that prepared, I put it in a huge bowl along with my salt. She recommends for every 3 heads of cabbage that you use 2.5 tablespoons of salt. So that's what I did, and then I added a little bit more based on the other 2 heads of cabbage. Then you massage it, and you keep massaging it, and then you will see that it'll start to break down. Once it has done that, I probably massaged it for a full minute. Once the cabbage has broken down, it will start to produce its own brine, which is why cabbage is probably my favorite. It's a lot of upfront work, but you don't have to go through the mess of making the brine. After it has made a lot of liquid, and it will reduce in size, over the bowl, you take one of your jars, fill it, and I mean pack it. This was trial and error. She does tell you in your video to pack it, but do I ever follow directions on a recipe? Not most of the time. I ran into a problem later with the other veggies, and I'll talk about that. But anyways, so you pack it full, reserve, and I probably should have said this up front, but reserve several of the outer leaves of the heads of cabbages. And what you're going to do is you're going to take 2 or 3, and you're going to take one at a time, and you're going to fold it, probably, I think I folded it in half and then half again, and you're going to push it down and make the brine come up and the cabbage stay down. What you're doing, and this is the same for all 3, is you're depriving it of oxygen, which helps the good bacteria to grow but inhibits the growth of the bad bacteria. Something to keep in mind throughout across the board is that it constantly, the cabbage, the veggie that you're fermenting, needs to stay below the brine. So the sauerkraut takes the longest, and it can go anywhere on your counter from a week to 3 or 4 weeks. In Farmhouse on Boone's video on her YouTube channel, she explains that she does about a week. I still felt at that point it tasted a little too much like cabbage, that I let it go a few days beyond that, and I was happy with it at that point. It's really about personal preference and how sour you want it. Another thing to keep in mind is that you will keep the lids on loose, whether you keep the original lids that come with the jars or you get the ones like I got. Loosely put it on there. If you're just making the sauerkraut, make sure you put it in a shallow baking dish. It will swell and continue to leak, and then you don't want that all over your countertop. You can buy some specialty tools like she mentions in her video, and so I bought those. I bought the glass weights that you set on top of the cabbage to keep everything down, and I also bought, which I can't find the glass weights at this point. I have no idea what I did with them. I gave part of them to my family and I kept one or two. Can't find them. But you can also buy these. My thought process after using both was I felt the glass weights were kind of unnecessary and a really big pain in the rear to get out of the jar. You can literally just make sure that you put enough cabbage leaves where they're gonna kind of grip to the sides and they'll keep down. Or you can get small Ziploc bags, put a rock in it, push it down, and I think that's just fine. I don't think the glass weights are needed, and I almost think they're kind of a pain. They also only work in wide mouth jars. They won't work in regular mouth jars. So the other thing I got was this. This I would definitely get again if I were making the sauerkraut. The other two, again, not necessary. This has a cut in the top, like a cross, and that allows the gases to escape that need to escape. That's why if you're not using one, you'll want to leave the lid very loosely put on the jar. Topper things again, then you just keep the ring that comes with it and screw it on top, and you can screw that tight if you have one of these, and it works great. I am going to look and see if they make them for regular mouthed jars, because I would like to have those. Back to the fermenting. I ran into a problem with the pickles and the jalapenos. This, by the way, is my second jar of jalapenos. I did carrots. So good. You can see the cabbage. That's a better angle. You can see the cabbage in the top right there. I did those next. While they were less work, the couple of things that I learned, when you're making the brine, it's a quart. So I just filled up one of these jars, a quart of water, and 2.5 tablespoons. Let me repeat that. Tablespoons of your real salt. The issue I found was I like a printed recipe. Going back and watching the video over and over again is kind of a pain. So I went to the blog and I looked up her fermented jalapenos and her fermented pickles. They called for 2.5 teaspoons of salt. So I go, and it had been some time since I had watched the video. I go and I make my brine. I make a double batch so I can do the pickles and the jalapenos, and I pour it over the veggies. I had not packed the jar like she said. I had quartered instead of halved the small cucumbers, and there was too much room. No matter how much I tried to weight it down, things were floating all over the place. So that is a tip. Follow that tip. Definitely pack the jar full. Especially cucumbers, they can't move around if they're all kind of packed in there like sardines. So you definitely want to do that. The second thing to keep in mind is you have to let the water cool down. If you pour hot water over your veggies, it kills all of the bacteria. You're relying on the bacteria that are present on the vegetables to grow those probiotics. Let the water cool down, let the brine cool down, and use 2.5 tablespoons per quart, not 2.5 teaspoons. I had to throw everything out, or all the brine out, start again. Then, when I realized the jar wasn't packed, I had to throw everything out and start again. Both the pickles and the jalapenos took about a week, 5 to 7 days. The good thing is you could try it. If you feel that it needs to be more sour, you can leave it out a little bit longer. But as far as me, about, I think it was 5 to 7 days is what really worked, and about a week and a half, almost 2 weeks of the sauerkraut worked for our taste. Somebody asked me, actually my neighbor asked me, oh, my sweet neighbor, God has blessed me, by the way, side tangent, with an amazing new neighbor. We are really fortunate to have them, so shout out. But anyway, she asked me, what would you eat the sauerkraut with? And the only thing that came to mind was sausage. And since then, it's been a couple of weeks, I have found any excuse to eat it with any dinner we're having. I just get a little cup and I dollop some sour cream in there. I put some sour cream in a little cup and we eat a couple of spoonfuls. You don't need to eat a whole lot. So we have a couple of spoonfuls with every meal. I'll have some jalapeños and some fermented carrots with every meal, and I just find myself any excuse to eat them. They're my favorite. I love hand cutting the jalapeños because the different thicknesses determine whether they're going to get really a little softer or whether they'll stay crunchy, and I kind of like a mixture of both. The carrots never lose their crunch, which is nice. And a tip that she does not share in her video that I would highly recommend. Are you listening to me? I would highly recommend is the first time I did the fermented jalapeños for my parents, I did a really big jar for them and a quart-sized jar for us. And I had the good sense to only have one hand to handle the jalapeños and one hand to cut. What I didn't have the good sense to do was to put a glove on the hand that was handling the jalapeños. I didn't realize how dry my hands are, it being cold. Although if you looked out the window right now, it is not cold. But my hands are dry, lots of like little micro cuts because of the dry skin, and my hand burned for an entire day. The next time I did it, which is this jar, I put a disposable rubber glove on the hand. I'm left-handed, so that's why I keep showing my right hand. I did put a disposable rubber glove on this hand and did not have any issues with my hand burning. Can we get a hallelujah? So that is what I would do if you choose to make the pickled or the fermented jalapeños. I would definitely recommend wearing a glove on the hand that's handling the jalapeños and only handle it with that hand. Everything was so cost effective that having to restart some of the things wasn't that big of a deal. In fact, to make a large jar plus a small jar of fermented jalapeños cost me, I think, $1.56. That's insane. That's a lot of jalapeños to eat. Overall, I'm really happy with it. I have been feeling better. I think that it was a really neat gift to give my family because it was something that I took time to do and had a really good time doing it and discovered that I really like sauerkraut. The one neat thing about making your own fermented sauerkraut is that for me, it has stayed crunchy. The texture is way different than store-bought sauerkraut. So if you don't like sauerkraut, maybe give your own fermented version a try because it has stayed texturally way better. The pickles, that was my only drawback, and that's why this is the original jar. It hasn't really been eaten, is that the cucumbers themselves got quite soft. My dad recommended that time I make it, to use pickle crisp, and that will keep the veggies crisp, and I think I will try that again if I make them because I prefer crisp pickles. If you don't care, I will tell you they're the best tasting pickles I've ever had. I put garlic and dill in mine. You could do it plain, straightforward. You could add peppercorns, whatever you'd like. I will link Farmhouse on Boone's original 3 videos down below because I think it's 3 separate videos, and any of the extra tools and salt. If you cannot get it in your store, you can order it on Amazon. So I will try to remember to link all that below. This is the second time filming this because the first one was way too blurry. I'm still trying to learn the settings on the camera, so please bear with me. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for coming to Bunny's Kitchen. Have a good day. God bless. Bye-bye.